Hello, welcome to Flory Models daily vlog here. We're on Monday the 25th of January 2016 and big thank you for all the feedback. Loads of you messages, especially direct messages through the contact me about the actual studio tour on Friday. Glad you enjoyed it. It's one of those things, there's just so much to show. I in fact missed little things, like a couple of you mentioned the other paint rack which is down below where the camera is. If you watch the live show you'll know Sid's often delving in there and everything else. So there's a few things we did miss off, but generally I think we covered everything in an overall. Okay, now I've had loads of questions about specific things, loads of things about editing, loads of things about obviously the lighting rig, stuff like that, and some of it I need to find out the information for myself because I can't remember. For instance, these lights up here, I can't remember what they're actually, the designation is for them, what their actual part serial numbers are, so I need to find it out because it's not written on them. I thought it'd be on the back, it's not. So I will find out and obviously I'll post up details and I'll answer back to you. A couple other ones and I've written them down. Question was thinners. Came up quite a few times about the thinners that I use and everything else. To be honest, I've sort of gone back a little bit. I'm tending to use Tamiya X20A, but as you can see, this is empty. This is because I put it into one of these, which is actually a, well, it's airbrush thinner. This is the Vallejo, but it's not. It's actually got X20A into it, purely because I was getting low on Vallejo's airbrush thinner, so that's what I've ended up doing. But personally, they're my two ones I would go to. I haven't really got anybody else's. I have got other little things in here. I've got up here some cellulose thinners, just the old Rustington stuff. I don't tend to use it. Trying to keep good, and when I say good, I'm trying to avoid hot products as much, especially this year. I know there's lots of force and against for using them and things like that, but at the end of the day, the way I look at it is it's a health thing, okay? And also it's your environment you work in. I don't want to be working in an environment with lots of hot products, things like that. Obviously, some things you can't really avoid. So like we've got the AK stuff up there, you know, that's obviously like a lacquer-based product, things like that. So technically, you know, you're going to need thinners and things like that with it, but I am trying to avoid things like self-leveling thinners because obviously that's a lacquer thinner in with an acrylic paint. I'm trying to keep all acrylic and everything else. I know technically X20A is a synthetic acrylic thinner. That's why it's got the old symbols on the back here. Basically means that it's toxic and it's flammable. Okay, so obviously it's not as nice as you could be. We're certainly not using water, but it's the best product I think, and I get the best use out of it per breathing it all in and stuff like that. The other thing I have to mention, a couple of you mentioned obviously that I do a lot of spraying here, and I don't have a spray booth actually running, things like that. What I tend to do is I'll show you a little bit here, but trust me, when that camera's finished, I literally now just turn over here and I'll spray there. You'll see these filters get dirty, then all of a sudden you'll get a clean one. As you know, we spoke about it a lot. I don't pay full price for filters anymore. I bought a giant roll of it myself. So what I do is cut them to the right length and I put them in here, because don't forget, technically that's the outside. You can see that's an old one, and I just cut them in, put them in, stick them in like that. Okay, and there we go, we're good to go again. And I just put them in that way instead of technically this way, and that way they go in. Very, very simple, and everything else like that. It's an extractor, so it's not just, you know, filtering it through a carbon filter, it's actually taking it clean out. And also what I tend to do if I am doing here, I will leave it running for 10 minutes to clean out the environment. And that gets onto another question about dust. Everyone was saying there isn't much dust in here. To be honest, again, a good extractor saves a lot of dust. So if I'm doing little jobs that perhaps, you know, technically you wouldn't think about using, but like sanding resin, I'll tend to do it over here and I'll sand it with that running, okay? And you'll notice all the dusty particles, things like that go. If I'm doing filler sanding, again, I'll go over to the extractor. So I'm using the extractor just not for airbrushing. I use it for anything that I think is a bit dirty, something else like that. If I'm doing big bits of resin, I'll do them outside anyway, and all things like that, purely because obviously the health, I don't want to be breathing it in, and also it is keeping the studio somewhat dust free and things like that. The other thing I think it helps as well with dust is carpet. Now, I know when I was obviously first building the studio and things like that, originally it was going to be laminate flooring, and then it was just that thing of originally I didn't like it because I don't think it's warm, it's not nice to work with and everything else. You know, I'm trying to make this as cozy as possible as I'm working here. Secondly though, acoustics. Didn't think of it at the time, but I know other people who've gone with like wooden floors and regretted it because sure, you know, the sound, it just echoes, sounds horrible in the room and everything else. So obviously it keeps down, but also it keeps the dust down. So we just get to hoover, to be honest, a couple of times a week. Usually after I finish building. I don't hoover when I'm building, purely because if any little bits go on the floor, I've still got a chance to find them. Otherwise you hoover it, goes up the actual hoover, and you lose all those little bits of photo etch and tiny bits for your model, things like that. So there we go. But let's say an extractor isn't just for airbrushing. If you use it for any type of dusty work, things like that, it should cut down the dust in the studio. Now don't get me wrong, I've still got a lot of dust here. You still have a bit, but for the amount of work that's going on here, as you say, it's usually 3 or 4 hours every day I'm in here. Yeah, obviously it builds up over time, and things like, you know, the shelves, if you move bottles, you'll notice dust in there and stuff like that. Right, filter for spray booth, that's the other thing. So I think we've covered that. It was just literally, it's not the standard one, admittedly. We spoke about it a lot on the live shows. We did some shows back in the past. If you search spray booth filters in the search on the main site, it will come up with it, no doubt, things like that. But basically, this is a giant roll for car sprayers. They buy it in big rolls. That's a 20 meter by, I think it is 5 foot roll of it, chopped up, and literally it was like, it was back in times a bit cheaper. They went up in price last year, but I've had that roll now getting on for a year, and I'm nowhere near it. So what you could do, a couple of you club together, buy a roll, get a 10 meter roll for about 50 quid, chop it up, you'll get loads of them out of it, literally loads and loads and loads, and it'll save you a fortune on filters. I think I worked it out, it works out around about £1 a filter. If you do like the 10 meter of it on a roll, works out about £1 each, something else like that. The camera I recorded the live show, this is the one obviously you're on now, which is my big one. It's the most expensive one we've got, and that is the Canon. It's the XA25. I've got it all written down there. The reason you can get the XA20, which is around about $250 cheaper, but it doesn't have direct feed out. This has got a live feed coming off of it, which can go into various bits of software and stuff like that. To be honest, I don't use it. It takes your standard SD cards in there. So what we have, it has 2 slots. And you can either have dual recording at the same time in case one never plays up, or you can just have it as a rollover. So when one card's full up, it rolls over to the second one. To be honest, it's got 2 64 gig cards in there, and obviously that's enough for around about 4 hours recording at the highest rate. And obviously we just have it set up to do the highest rate and everything else. The other cameras are a little bit less, they're not recording quite as heavy as that, but things like that. Also lens for it, it's not a wide angle lens or anything special, it's literally just the camera's one. Yes, you can change the lens on the front and all the bits and pieces with it, but actually this is just the standard lens that it comes with and everything else. And yes, it is very nice balanced and everything else, and it's great for what we do here. It's just the file sizes are massive. You know, it's a megabyte per second. So horrendous, and things like that. So yeah, that's about it on those questions. You've got any more? I know there's a couple for the flight sim one. I'm going to do those slightly separate because I know loads of people have asked me about DCS, my flight sim setup, IR tracker, things like that. I'll cover that slightly separate because obviously this is more modelling and I don't want to get people confusing or draw away and all those things like that. So I'll do a separate one on about my flight sim setup and rig and things like that. Other question I've got to ask you is, obviously part 3 of the main, here it is, there's nothing in that box, Terminator is up on the site now. So this is this guy over here who's literally just waiting for primer. He's just sat there. I'm just trying to get the MIG together today before we go in primer. So that is here. The question is really, what markings do you want to see it in? Now I quite fancy doing the Splinter one, which is this guy here. Okay, it's going to be quite tricky to do it, I'm going to admit it. It's not going to be the easy option because you can't just spray it, okay? So you might want to be thinking, okay, we want to see how Splinter work's done and everything else. It is in this sort of urban camo, very much like we did Tumblr, to be honest. It's the same colours. Okay, down there is that. Or do you want to see it in something a little bit more traditional? So your other options, okay, is to do it in this guy down here, which is a sort of, you know, your sort of deserty-ish multicam, things like that. Okay, so it tends to be the light sand with the green and the light brown on top of it. Or do you want it in, okay, your standard Russian greeny colour, which is obviously the type of box art one, things like here. So this is more your woodland camo, things like that, your more your European camo. So this is A, which is your camo. I'll put a poll up with this particular video anyway. This is B for the more sandy, but again, it's all your swirly patterns, things like that. Or if you want to actually see it in the actual splinter camo, sort of the urban things like that, then that'll actually be C. Okay, so we'll be doing those. So really, that is your options. But as I say, part 3 is up on the site now, and it almost gets you to this stage. There's a couple more bits. We've got to put obviously the tube missiles on there, the tow system, things like that, a couple other bits and pieces, but generally it's almost to this one, and obviously the mine system on the front, on the mine plough, and the electromagnetic whatever they are, jobbies on the front poles. So those needs to be sorted out, and they'll go on as well. So that'll be in part 4, and then part 5 hopefully will be then straight into all the paint work and all the bits and pieces like that. So that's about it for today. As I say, there's your question. Let me know what markings you'd like to see it in. I'll get the paint organised and all the bits and pieces. We do it like that. And then tomorrow we're going to be talking about sanding. So I'm going to do that video for the actual about sanding, how we're going to sand this, how we sanded this one, the basics of it, and all the bits and pieces. That'll be like a free bit to watch tomorrow as well. So if you're a non-member, you'll see it. Full members, obviously you'll get this as a full video, and everything else will be up on Wednesday, which will get you to this stage anyway. And we can take it from there and move forward. But what I'm going to do today is get the wings on, which I have to say are a beautiful fit. They really go in very, very nicely. So no problems with those. There's no gap or anything on those. They really do fit very nice. The rest of it has all gone together fantastically well, no problems at all. So we can get that one together, and then by the end of the week, that one will be in paint as well. And obviously it's quite exciting because we're going to be using the Vallejo paints on that one for the first time in anger, so to speak, on a proper model instead of just on buster and test pieces like that. So there we go. That's it from me. Happy modelling, take care, and remember to vote in the poll.